A single Viking bow could pull over 90 pounds and launch an arrow nearly 200 meters. But they didn't buy these things. They carved them by hand, straight from the forest. One wrong cut, one hidden knot, and the whole bow could explode in your hands. So how did they build something this powerful? Without modern tools or even knowing if it would survive the first shot. In Viking lands, the forest decided who lived through war. A sword could be forged in a week. But a good bow? That took a year of patience, and one wrong tree could ruin it all. When a Viking bowyer walked into the woods, he wasn't just chopping trees, he was listening to them. The right wood could save a man's life. The wrong one could shatter in his hands. They hunted one tree above all others, yew, the tree of life and death, pale on the outside, dark at the core, like bone wrapped in muscle. The pale sapwood stretched with every draw, while the dark heartwood pushed back, holding the force. Nature had already built the perfect composite bow. The Vikings just had to uncover it, but yew didn't grow everywhere. Up north, it was rare, so some bowyers turned to elm or ash, both strong but far less forgiving. One knot, one twist in the grain, and the bow would crack like old bone. Archaeologists found a 191-centimeter yew bow at Hedeby, powerful enough to send an arrow over 200 meters, but what's more amazing is how they made it. Each cut followed the grain exactly, shaving one thin layer at a time. Missed the line, and months of work exploded. Follow it perfectly. And you could hold a weapon that decided who lived and who didn't. That's why the first strike of the axe mattered most. It wasn't just cutting wood, it was choosing survival. And that's why they only did it in winter, when the forest itself stood still. They always went in winter. The sap stopped flowing, the wood tightened, and the air dried clean. A tree cut in summer carried moisture that turned to rot, but a winter-cut log stayed solid. Viking bowyers learned that the hard way, split too early, and the stave cracked like thin ice. They used axes, never saws, because a saw tore fibers across the grain. Each log was split lengthwise, clean down the middle, then again into quarters. Those long billets became staves, each about 6 feet, the beginning of a bow. The rule was simple: follow the grain or start over. Even one hidden knot could ruin months of work. After cutting, the staves rested high above the ground, away from damp soil. They sealed the ends with animal fat or tar to stop cracks, then stacked them under airflow. Drying took months, sometimes a year. A stave that dried too fast twisted, too slow, and fungus ate it. Patience mattered more than strength. Archaeologists believe Hedeby bowyers dried yew under roof eaves or inside warm halls, turning them every few weeks. The grain tightened, colors deepened from pale yellow to brown. But the hardest part wasn't cutting. It was carving a single heartbeat of the tree without breaking it. Now comes the part that broke most beginners. They called it chasing the ring. You take a knife, lift the bark, and follow one single growth line around the stave from one end to the other. No breaks, no skips, no second chances. Every ring tells a story of 1 year of the tree's life. Summer growth, winter rest, scars from frost or storm. The bow's back must follow one of those rings without breaking it. If your knife cuts through, the bow might split the first time it bends. With yew, it's even trickier. The pale sapwood wanted to tear, and the darker heartwood fought your blade. But that's what gave yew its power. The sapwood stretched, the heartwood compressed, and together they stored energy like muscle and bone. Some bowyers used scrapers made of iron or flint, working hours just to keep one clean, unbroken line. Archaeologists studying the Hedeby bow saw that perfect continuity. No gaps, no ring breaks, proof of an expert hand. When they shaped the belly, they left more heartwood near the grip for compression. A single wrong pass could change the draw weight by 10 to 15 pounds. That kind of mistake meant your shot fell short or your limb shattered. Every flake of wood mattered. Now, the real shaping could begin, carving the D-shaped belly that turned quiet wood into a weapon. The stave finally starts to look like a bow, but this is also the step where everything can still go wrong. The bowyer begins carving the belly, the side that faces him when he draws. He shapes it into a smooth, rounded curve, the famous D profile. That shape let the wood flex without breaking. The dark heartwood near the belly handled the crushing force, while the pale sapwood on the back stretched like sinew. Together, they stored massive energy every time the bow bent. The Hedeby and Ballandary bows, both around 190 centimeters long, carried this D profile. Their limbs were thick near the grip and tapered evenly toward the tips. Each side had to bend evenly. One hard spot meant danger. A crooked limb meant the bow threw arrows sideways or snapped clean in half. Some bowyers rubbed animal grease or beeswax into the belly to keep fibers flexible, especially in cold air. Yew allowed that perfect balance, springy yet unyielding, but when they used elm or ash, they carved wider limbs to spread the strain. Every stroke was a wager between power and survival. When the shape finally felt right, the bowyer smiled once, then frowned again, because the next step could undo everything. The tillering would decide whether the bow lived or died. This is where skill meets luck. The bowyer strings the bow halfway and begins the test known as tillering, bending the limbs slowly, watching every curve. If one limb bends more than the other, the bow twists. If one holds too much tension, it snaps. Either way, weeks of work die in a heartbeat. The Hedeby bow's tiller marks show a long, gradual taper from grip to tips, proof of careful hands. Draw weights reached around 40 to 45 kilograms, enough to drive an arrow through a wild boar or a man in leather. But that power came with risk. Bend it cold or too fast, and the belly crushed under pressure, leaving deep creases called crissles. Those scars meant weakness forever. Some bowyers worked by firelight, turning the wood toward warmth before each test. A few rubbed oil or fat across the limbs to stop sudden breaks in cold air. Each time the bow flexed farther, the heartwood groaned like rope under tension. When it finally took its full curve, everyone exhaled. But this was just the calm before the next gamble. Stringing the bow for the first time, where one mistake could cost a jaw or a life. The bow is alive now, but it still needs a heartbeat. The string. Now came the step where many bowyers held their breath. The tips of the bow carried all the tension, and one careless cut could ruin months of work. They carved tiny nocks, barely deep enough to hold the string. Some bows, like the Hedeby find, had a small side notch on the upper limb instead of two symmetrical cuts. That detail saved strength right where fibers were most fragile. The lower limb usually carried a fixed knot. The upper limb took a loop so the archer could string or unstring faster. That design helped avoid splitting the wood at the ends, which happened often with deep horn nocks. The Vikings worked with what they had, pure yew, elm, or ash, so less carving meant more survival. Bowyers also wrapped tips with linen or sinew bindings, sometimes sealed with resin or pitch to stop cracks. It was a safety line and decoration in one. When you drew a 90-pound bow, that string hummed with power. One slip or uneven knock could send it whipping like a whip crack across your face. Therefore, every small detail mattered. But even a perfect bow needed the right cord, and that's where the sea, salt, and rain forced them to choose carefully what their strings were made from. The bow could be perfect, but without a string, it was just wood. Viking bowyers understood that. They needed a cord strong enough to hold 90 pounds of draw and still survive sea air, rain, and salt. That ruled out animal sinew and gut. Those worked in dry lands, but in northern seas they swelled, rotted, and lost strength within days. Therefore, the Vikings turned to flax and hemp, both grown across Scandinavia for rope and cloth. Archaeologists studying Viking textiles found mixed fibers of flax and hemp woven even into fine garments, proving they knew how to twist and treat strong fibers. Wax and fat sealed the cords, keeping them dry and flexible. A few drops of oil or tallow rubbed in before battle could make the difference between life and a snapped string. Strings were usually 2 to 3 millimeters thick, twisted tight, and served near the loops for reinforcement. Spare strings traveled in dry pouches wrapped in wool or leather. Every archer knew that once a string broke, the bow was useless until replaced. They prepared for that. Each kit held at least 2 or 3 strings, all waxed, coiled, and ready. However, a string alone meant nothing without the right arrow, one that matched the bow's power and purpose exactly. A bow is only half a weapon. The other half has to fly. Each arrow had to fit the bow's draw weight like a key fits a lock. Too light, and the arrow whipped off course. Too heavy, and it dropped early. Therefore, bowyers shaped pine, birch, and ash shafts, usually around 70 to 85 centimeters long and 8 to 10 millimeters thick, matching the power of their tall yew or elm bows. Archaeologists found iron arrowheads across Dublin, Hedeby, and Birka, hundreds of them. Some were narrow bodkins for piercing armor gaps, others were broadleaf blades for hunting elk or boar. Each head told a story of use. A Dublin find even showed a stash of 20 matching warheads stored in leather, likely for a single archer. Fletching mattered too. They used goose or swan feathers, 3 per shaft, bound with sinew or thread, and sealed with pitch. The spiral set made arrows spin, keeping them stable at long range. A well-matched arrow could fly 200 meters with a heavy draw. However, arrows wore out fast. Warheads bent, feathers tore, shafts splintered. Every longship carried spares and quivers found at Hedeby, stitched from hide to resist salt spray, but even the best arrow and bow could die to time. So how did the Vikings keep them alive? Keeping a bow alive took as much work as building it. Every voyage meant salt, rain, and cold trying to eat the wood. Therefore, Vikings treated their bows with light oil, animal fat, or pine tar, the same materials used to seal ships. A thin layer kept moisture out and stopped the limbs from warping. Tar pits found across Norway and Sweden show they made hundreds of liters at a time, proof that sealing wood was part of daily life, not a rare ritual. Strings got the same care. Wax and tallow kept them from fraying, and archers checked them every morning before sailing or battle. Many carried 2 spare strings stored inside leather pouches or wrapped in cloth to stay dry. If a string snapped mid-fight, another could be looped on in seconds. Quivers and arrows were wiped with grease to stop rust. Even feather glue got attention. Mixes of pine pitch and fat acted like early waterproof sealant. A careless man could lose his gear overnight. The same weapon that hunted deer in peace guarded harbors in war, and the same patience that shaped it kept it alive. That's what made the Viking bow more than a tool. It was a partnership between man, wood, and time. You've seen how Vikings turned forest into war. But what they forged next changed the battlefield forever. And it wasn't made of wood. Click right here. You don't want to miss this.